There is something funny about goats. They never pretend to be innocent. They eat your vegetables, look you straight into the eye, and keep chewing while you chase them. At least, goats are honest about it. Some farms' problems aren't. Take this tomato field, green leaves, healthy stems, beautiful flowers. If farming had a beauty contest, this field would win. But it could also be losing money. That is the dangerous part. This farm doesn't look bankrupt, it looks successful. So, can a healthy looking farm actually be a sick business? Before you answer, let me make it worse. Imagine two neighbors, both work the whole day, same hours, same village, sometimes the same rain. One retires comfortably, the other keeps saying farming has no money. So either nature is unfair or we are measuring the wrong thing. I think we are measuring the wrong thing because farmers think they grow crops. I don't. I think farmers grow relationships and relationships are invisible. That's why you can walk through two farms, see exactly the same tomatoes, and completely miss the business underneath them. Today, we are going underground, not below the soil, below the decisions. Because there is another farm living underneath the one you can see. Once you find it, you will stop asking, what should I plant? You will start asking, what system am I building? And that question changes everything. Chapter 1, the swamp that won the argument. Let me show you a business lesson hiding inside a swamp. Most farmers walk past a swamp and see a problem. Too much water, too many mosquitoes, impossible. Arrowroot farmers walk past the same swamp and see a promotion. Who is right? Neither. The swamp isn't good or bad, it is just honest. It refuses to become something it isn't. Nature never wakes up saying, today I want to become dryland. It just stays a swamp. Farmers spend years trying to convince reality to become something else. Drain it, fight it, argue with it. Nature just watches patiently, like a grandmother listening to a 5-year-old explain why vegetables are unnecessary. She already knows how the story ends. So, what changed when you planted arrowroot? Did the water disappear? No. Did the swamp apologize? Definitely not. Only one thing changed: the relationship. And the same place that looked useless became valuable. The villain moved. It wasn't the land, it was the decision. That is dangerous knowledge because once you accept it, you lose your favorite excuse. Now, let us leave the swamp for dry land. Farmers spend thousands trying to make dry land behave like wetland. Tanks, pumps, pipes, fuel. But who told you dry land wanted to grow tomatoes or cabbages? Sorghum never complained. Millet never complained. Pigeon peas never held a meeting demanding more rainfall. The argument exists mostly inside our heads. Nature keeps offering partnerships. We keep applying for the wrong employer, then say farming is difficult. Sometimes we are just negotiating with someone who never intended to negotiate. This lesson isn't about swamps or arrowroot or tomatoes. Most farmers don't lose money because nature defeated them. They lose money because they kept solving the wrong constraint. That is the invisible farm. It isn't made of soil, it is made of relationships. Chapter 2, the crop nobody plants, but everyone harvests. I want you to imagine a crop that grows on almost every farm on earth. It survives drought, floods don't kill it, goats don't eat it, no fungicide has ever controlled it. Yet, it quietly steals more profit than some diseases. Can you guess what it is? Waiting. Nobody admits they are growing it. Ask a farmer what he planted, and he will say tomatoes, onions, cabbages. Nobody says 27 days of waiting. Yet, that is exactly what many farms produce. Think about a nursery. You sow, you water, you wait. Seedlings need time. Nothing wrong with that. But what is your field doing while your nursery is busy? Most fields answer nothing. That sounds harmless. It isn't. Nature has a rule. If you don't give time a job, it gives itself one. Have you noticed weeds never seem unemployed? Nobody waters them, nobody sprays them, yet they always arrive early. Nature hates empty positions. Leave your land idle and she will hire weeds without asking you permission. Now, imagine two farmers, both planting tomato seedlings today. Farmers A goes home, his field waits, his money waits. 24 days later, the seedlings finally go in. Farmers B does something small. Before leaving, she broadcasts coriander seeds across the empty field. 24 days later, she harvests coriander, then the tomatoes move in. Same land, same weather, same tomatoes, one invisible relationship changed. If you asked both farmers how many acres they own, they would give the same answer. But ask, how many productive days does your land produce each year? Now you're measuring the real business. Land can be bought, time refuses to be sold. Farmers hate an empty granary, an empty wallet, an empty tank, but somehow an empty calendar doesn't bother us. Maybe it should. A farm becomes profitable not when every acre is occupied, but when every day has a purpose. Before you rush off to plant coriander everywhere, don't. There is no perfect crop, only perfect relationships. The coriander worked because of the tomato. Take away the tomato and it is just another crop. Remember the swamp? Arrowroot wasn't magical. It was the right answer to the right constraint. Profit is not created by working harder. It is created by removing the next constraint, one relationship at a time. Chapter 3, the most expensive fertilizer is free. Farmers argue endlessly about fertilizer. DAP, CAN, NPK, organic manure. Ask 10 farmers, get 11 answers. What almost nobody argues about? Bad decisions. We will spend hours comparing a $50 fertilizer, then make a $5,000 decision in under 5 minutes. Two farmers walk into an aggregate, buy the same bag of the same weight, of the same price. One makes money, one loses money. So, was a fertilizer good or bad? Wrong question. Fertilizer has never made a decision. People do. Maybe we have been interviewing the wrong suspect. Imagine baking bread with the best flour, the best oven, the best yeast, and then baking it for 6 hours. You don't get premium bread, you get a very expensive brick. The ingredients were not wrong, the relationship was. Farmers A says, I'm waiting for fertilizer before I transplant. Fair enough. Farmers B prepares the field today, installs irrigation tomorrow, finishes taking next week. By the time fertilizer arrives, everything else is ready. Both farmers are waiting. Only one farm stopped moving. That is what profitable systems do. When one wheel slows, another keeps turning. Watch ants, nobody blows a whistle, yet keeps moving. And the colony keeps growing. Everything connects. Now, compare that to some farms. The fertilizers arrives, but the laborers haven't been called. The laborers arrive, but the seedlings aren't ready. The seedlings are ready, but the market hasn't been found. Everybody is working, nothing is flowing. That is not a lazy farm. That is traffic. Here is the dangerous question. If I removed every crop from your farm today, would your system still know what to do tomorrow? Or does it only work when everything goes according to plan? That is the difference between a farm and a system. A farm depends on good decisions. A system survives the bad ones. Remember the swamp? It didn't change. The empty field? It didn't change. The fertilizer bag? It didn't change either. The only thing that kept changing was the relationship. That is why I've stopped asking, what's wrong with this farm? Instead, which relationship is out of balance? Too much water becomes a flood. Too little becomes a drought. Too much fertilizer burns roots. Too little starves them. Even food becomes poison when balance disappears. The most profitable farms aren't the ones with the most resources. They're the ones where relationships stay in balance. Chapter 4. The farm that fired its best employee. I want you to know something. Did you find your buyer before you planted or after? Be honest. Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. Now, back to the farm. Let me tell you about the shortest business meeting ever held in a farm. It lasted 3 seconds. The farmer looked at his budget, looked at his workers, and said, "We need to cut costs." So he fired someone. The funny part, he fired the only employee making him money, not a person, his market. Harvest day arrives, tomatoes red and firm. You smile. This is the day I get paid. No, this is the day reality votes. The market voted long before your tomatoes changed color. It voted when you chose the variety, when you planted, when everyone else planted. Harvest just announces the results. Farmers say, "I'm looking for a market," after planting. That is like building a bus, then asking where the road is. Markets don't appear because tomatoes are ready. They are relationships. And relationships hate last-minute introductions. Imagine calling someone you've ignored for 6 months. "Would you like to buy tons of tomatoes by lunchtime?" Even your relatives would hesitate. Which come first, the tomatoes or the customer? Most farmers say the tomatoes. Profitable farms quietly say the customer. Because the customer decided what the tomatoes become long before the seed was planted. Planting is no longer the beginning, listening is. The swamp wasn't wrong, we asked it the wrong question. Now we ask the market the wrong questions too. How will you pay me? The better question, what problem are you ready paying someone else solve? That moves you from selling crops to solving problems. A restaurant doesn't buy onions, it buys consistency. A supermarket doesn't buy tomatoes, it buys reliability. A trader doesn't buy cabbages, he buys certainty. The crop is just the packaging. The real product is trust. Farms quietly lose money by celebrating the harvest, then looking for buyers. It is like baking a wedding cake before checking if anyone is getting married. The swamp taught us, don't fight reality. Waiting taught us, don't leave time unemployed. Balance taught us, every decision affects another. Now the market teaches us, profit begins where the customer enters the system, not where the seed enters the soil. Two farmers can grow identical tomatoes and harvest completely different businesses. One grew tomatoes, the other grew trust. Trust just happened to produce tomatoes along the way. Chapter 5. The farm that complained about space. Let me tell you about the farmer who was sure his biggest problem was space. He walked me around his farm, big trees in the corner, crops underneath, pale, reaching for light. A live fence swallowing the boundary, thick and wild, feeding nobody. "I need more land," he said. I didn't answer right away because that question sounded familiar. I had heard it before in a swamp. Remember the swamp? It wasn't drowning, it was just waiting for the right question. This farm wasn't short on land, it was short on relationships. Look at those crops under the big trees. They are not failing because the farm is small. They are failing because they are fighting a tree for sunlight and losing. Nature already solved this. Somewhere out there, a passion fruit vine is climbing acacia tree. Nobody introduced them. Nobody negotiated the contract. They just figured out how to share the same address without starving each other. The vine gets the ladder. The acacia tree gets company. Neither one apologizes for the arrangement. So here is a question worth asking under your own big trees. What if the shade isn't the enemy? What if the wrong crop is? Now, walk with me to the coffee, rows and rows of it, standing alone, taking up every inch you own. Coffee is patient. It makes you wait years before it pays you back. But patience isn't free. While you wait, the land is unemployed again. Remember what happens when the land is unemployed? It hires itself weeds. So what if between those coffee rows, you planted bananas? Bananas don't ask coffee to retire. They just ask for 25% of the room. Coffee keeps it is 75%. It is the main salary. Bananas bring home a small paycheck continuously after 9 months, while coffee is still saving for its first big one. Same land, two incomes, one relationship, properly balanced. Now, let us talk about that fence. Every farmer needs a boundary. Most farmers build one that costs nothing and pays nothing back. A wall, a hedge that exists only to say, this is mine and nothing else. But what if the fence itself becomes an employee? A row of bananas can mark your boundary and hand you a harvest. A line of sorghum can guard your edge and still feed your table. Even trees planted with intention can protect your land while quietly building your timber account. The fence was never the problem. The problem was hiring a fence that refuses to work. By now, you've probably noticed something. This chapter was never about space. Ask a farmer what is short of, and he will almost say land. But land isn't the constraint. It never was. The constraint is the relationship between what is growing and what is growing next to it. Fix that relationship, and the same fence, the same shed, the same wasted corner starts paying rent. That is not a bigger farm, that is a smarter one. Chapter 6, one sentence. I am not going to ask you a big question this time, just one. Which relationship on your farm is out of balance? Don't answer me now. Walk your farm tomorrow morning and find it yourself. Look at the swamp you've been fighting. Look at the field you left unemployed. Look at the fertilizer you blamed. Look at the market you met too late. Look at the shed you've been arguing with. Somewhere in that walk, the answer will be standing there, waiting the way it always was. When you find it, come back and write one sentence. Just one. I read every single one. Because somewhere in your one sentence is the exact solution another farm in the agri-profit community has been searching for. And if you walk your farm and everything looks right, but profit still feels wrong, don't guess. That is exactly why we run farm consultations. Because sometimes the constraint isn't obvious until someone else works the system beside you. You will find Agri-Profit's email and WhatsApp business number in the description below. Next week, we leave the land completely. Same question, different farm. A farm with no soil at all. I can't wait to show you why that one is invisible too. The invisible farm was never about what you can see growing. It was always about what is growing between the things you can see. Go and find your one relationship, then come back and let's balance the next one together. We sincerely thank you all for supporting us. God is good and I will see you in the next one.